Howdy, and welcome to another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I'm your host, Daniel Dolphin.
I did want to let y'all know, if you have been following me and enjoying some of the bit information that we have got, we have a new online course that's being released. It has only been available up till now in a masterclass version that is like 30 hours long. We are now going to release the original 6 modules of that course, which does include the bit video, but a lot of add-ons as well as a 70-page study guide that goes along with the course. We have also included in this self-guided course 2 of the videos from the master class where we had some special guests coming in. So that's something like an extra 4 to 5 hours worth of content for you to watch that I think adds a lot of value to the course and gives you an idea of what the master class would be like if you decided to upgrade to it at a later time. You also, because you've already bought the self-guided part of the course, you won't have to pay full freight for the master class version if you decide to go to it later. If you're interested in checking that out, head over to thebitcourse.com. We will have a link in the show notes to the specific page with the self-guided course if you're interested in more information. At the very least, I would encourage you to get on our subscriber list for the newsletter. I do send out pretty regular emails with some tips and things, and that's not stuff I share on social media. That's all exclusive to this particular newsletter. So anyway, check it out. I think it's well worth your time and money, and it does cover way more than just the dry bit mechanics and stuff you may think it has. It's got a whole lot in there about how to use your hands, how to apply this bit in practical terms versus that bit, kind of the differences between them, the things this is going to help you with versus that. So it isn't just mechanical kind of stuff. It's a lot of very practical information as well. I'm very pleased to be joined today with Miss Maddy Butcher. She owns Cayuse Communications, which is an umbrella website that also has her newest offering, On Ice, the High Country Outsider newsletter, Horsehead, Knicker News, the best horse practices, and much information she sends out there. Well worth your time to get on all of her newsletters. Maddy is a professional writer. She writes op-eds for the Washington Post, as well as her newsletters. She is the author of several books: Beasts of Burden, A Writer's Reader, Science, Sense, and Sentiment, as well as Horsehead, a book that I reference quite a bit, Brain Science, and Other Insights. Maddy is the founder of the Best Horse Practices Summit. She has formerly been the producer of the Best Horse Practices podcast, which just recently came to an end. And I consider her a good friend. We also just spent some time together riding horses, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Maddy, how are you this morning?
I'm well. Thanks for having me, Daniel.
Always my pleasure. Well, we're going to throw a few lightning round questions at you. Remember, these are for points and prizes, so you want to be on your A game. All right?
Yes, sir.
If you were a Jedi, what % chance is there that you would misuse the Force?
0.
Okay. I could have made a Lord of the Ring reference, but you confided to me that you actually listened to that to put yourself to sleep. So I wasn't going to bring that one out. Morning or evening?
Morning.
How long do you dunk a cookie in milk?
What a good question. Let me see. Half a second to a second.
Okay. If people don't recognize Clark Kent because of his glasses, do you think his optometrist knows his real identity?
Certainly.
What's the best horse movie?
I get horse movies to me are like horse races. And I get really scared watching horse races because I don't want horses to be injured. So I always check to make sure that no horses had to be put down in, say, the Kentucky Derby, and I'll watch a replay of it. And I get very wary of horse movies because inevitably something tragic happens and is horrible. I actually just watched a documentary about indigenous teenager that was training in the Indian relays, which are one rider and 3 or 4 horses. It's a crazy event, and I want to say it's specific to North America, but I'm not sure. And this was a documentary. Daniel, I'll get a link to it because I don't even know the name of it. I don't recall the name of it, but I'll get the link to it and share it with your listeners. It's really, really fun.
Okay, that sounds interesting. What skill or technique do you not have with a horse that you admire in someone else and wish you did have? Is there any particular area you're trying to grow your skills? I know you do your own trimming and you're riding and cowboying and all of that stuff, but is there a particular thing you'd like to open the door on you haven't yet?
Feel. It's the kind of thing you and I were talking about this last weekend. Randy Riemann said to me that there's a scale that people go from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence to conscious competence to unconscious competence, and which is to say that you can never learn enough. And I have a certain amount of feel, but I certainly don't have the feel that you have, and I aspire to have more feel and to be able to get more done that my horse can be happy with.
A very noble goal. And for the record, I'm still working on my feel as well.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say is the most important quality of a horseman or horsewoman?
Well, not to beat a dead horse, but feel, certainly. I think that one of the reasons we do something like the Best Horse Practices Summit is to increase the barrel of knowledge that people have. The first interaction I had with my horses when you were visiting, I wasn't seeing things that you were. And the more you can see that a horse is sensitively reacting to, the better you'll be. And so, if there's one thing, it's just a keen observation and an ability to shift your behavior and your mechanics to better serve your horse.
Well said. On a scale of 1 to 10, how well can you back a trailer?
Maybe 6. I mean, I live in a country and I work with people who can back trailers with their eyes closed, which is a stark contrast to, when I started driving a trailer, I was in a very homogenous mix of a bunch of ladies like me who didn't know how to drive with a trailer behind their truck. So I'm much better than I used to be. And I am at the bottom of the pack when it comes to the people that I work with, trying to squeeze into a tiny space with a big stock trailer.
I've got a few here that are too obvious, so I will expedite things. Horse industry related pet peeve. This could be a book. Maybe this will be a book. That would be a good book for you. But what have you got?
Horse on a scale wide, a horse industry wide scale, I'd say rushing things, everything from horse racing to futurities. I think that horses need more time to develop mentally and physically. That's an industry-wide problem. I'd say it continues to be a problem that people are treating horses like humans and putting them in rooms, as in stalls, and giving them way too much processed food, as in grains. And my singular pet peeve is cross ties. I really hate cross ties. They don't, in my mind, there's no reason for them to make sense in a horse's mind. And so I'm not sure why that continues to be a practice.
Okay. Do you have a least favorite and most favorite barn chore?
I don't have any least favorite. I think that I used to muck stalls a lot for a living, as well as in my own space. Now I just drag a dry lot, but mucking manure is very meditative.
Mm-hmm.
So that people turn their noses up at mucking manure, but I don't.
Mm-hmm. It is the kind of thing you can get lost in for sure.
Right.
Crunchy or smooth peanut butter?
Crunchy, please.
All right. I'm with you on that one. Would you tell us something unexpected about you? And knowing you, that could be a pretty deep pond, but so what have you got?
Something that people don't know about me. Geez, what do people say, Daniel?
I don't know. I think you're pretty much a mysterious figure to most. So just about I could think of 100 things probably that would shock a lot of people about you, but just pick one.
Okay. I guess that my kids would call me a little nutty because I recently acquired a fourth dog. So you can call me the crazy dog lady. Four dogs, 4 horses. But I acquired Daisy for a specific purpose because I'm trying to put myself in a position to do some range riding. As some people know, there is a big wolf reintroduction going on now in Colorado, and there are jobs out there to range ride in wolf country to keep wolves away from livestock. And Daisy is half Great Pyrenees, roughly, half livestock guardian dog, big girl. She'll probably top out at 80 pounds. And I figure she'll be a little bit of a deterrent when we're riding in wolf country. Because my other dogs that I have that are working dogs are, 35 pounds, kind of snack size for wolves.
All right. Well, I have a question that's in here specifically because of you. Are you decisive or indecisive? But we won't go there again this time. Cold showers or cold food forever? Which would you pick?
That's horrible. That's just a horrible question. Can I just say I'm moving to Panama if I'm facing that situation?
So no cold whatsoever, if possible.
We're just coming out of winter and I'm so over it. So
What is the best smell in the barn?
I mean, manure, certainly. Manure, leather, the smell of a sweaty horse. I guess I am going for the mass group of smells that I love, as opposed to one singular one. But yeah, sweaty horses, manure, leather. Yeah.
Left lead or right lead? Do you have one that you have to be more intentional about, one that's more natural or unnatural to you?
Yeah. Interestingly, I think because of scoliosis that I have, I always seem to be, say, I have to be super conscientious about not always picking up on the left diagonal. Even if I'm trail riding, my body says, okay, we're going to start posting now. And I am so habitual about it that I have to skip a beat in order to post on the other diagonal, which is, I think that is a scoliosis thing, that I'm just a little crooked and one thing is more comfortable than the other, but not sure.
I actually have the same problem, but it comes for me from riding racehorses for years and always going the same direction and everything. But yep. Sweet, salty, or spicy?
I actually wrote, and I can share this link. It's on Best Horse Practices. I wrote about this great cookbook called Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. And it's about how, in order to have something taste good, you have to have a combination of, say, the acidity and it's kind of like why we love ketchup with French fries, the saltiness and the fattiness of the French fries with the acidity of ketchup, for instance. And so it's a blend, and I think you'll find similar blends with what you do with horses. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I like it. Do you have a favorite dinosaur or deep sea creature?
You're so wacky. What's the squat dinosaur that kind of looks like a horny toad?
Triceratops? Yeah.
I'll go with the Triceratops. Yeah.
Me too. Absolutely.
I love horny toads, which you don't see very often out here.
Well, very cool. Let me tabulate your score real fast. You're 5,411 points, which makes you our highest scorer of all time, Maddy, and that entitles you to either an awkward silence or a genuine compliment, your choice.
Shit, can I get both? I love awkward silences, but then I like to feel good about myself too. So I don't know if we can squeeze them both in.
There's almost nothing better than a good awkward silence. So I want to thank you for picking that one. And yes, you're the high scorer of all time. So I mean, if you want to, you get to, right? What am I going to tell you? No. So for a genuine compliment, I think I would have to for you go with your heart, because you are very consistently starting things for the good of others, and very few people want to go through all of the pain and the ass that is involved in starting something from scratch. And here you're doing it just continuously over and over and over. And all of the things that I'm aware of, which is several, that you have done have been really for the greater good, with that in mind, that on your heart. From Buck the Trend, which is the mental health summit we'll talk a little bit about, to the Best Horse Practices Summit, which is not about the popular trendy things, but about the things that are good and maybe not so popular, but we should all be doing them. And then your most recent project, All Nice, which is just about inspiring moments that people who work outdoors have had, sharing it with others to kind of encourage that sort of thing. So I think that's a pretty consistent theme going through your world, and I certainly commend you for having the courage and the oomph to take action on things most people don't take action on.
Thank you. Appreciated.
Yes, ma'am. Well, you said that the thing you wanted to talk about most was kind of the weekend that we just had. So I don't publicize this, but I do actually do quite a few private type clinics where an individual or a small group of people will hire me to come out and spend some time with them. And work with them on their horses, and it's all about individual time and so forth. So we just did that. I just got back from Colorado yesterday. So share with me your thoughts.
Yeah, so just for listeners, I guess it was a very much a embellished treat to have Daniel come out, which is to say I was spoiling myself. Of course, it's a kind of a once a year or even less type of expenditure. But I really felt going into this season, I do a lot of day work with ranchers here, and I have two young horses that both have some issues. And came off my horse last summer, broke my wrist, and was lacking the skills and the confidence to move forward with them in a way that was good for them and good for me. And I didn't want that to be so, going into a season where you really have to rely on your horses and rely on your sense to have a good season out there. 90% of the time I'm riding alone. 90% of the time I am out where if something happened, no one would find me. So this was an important visit and an investment that I felt was necessary for myself moving forward with my horsemanship. To talk a little bit about the horses that we worked with over 3 days. Waddy is a 9-year-old that I acquired last summer, has a lot of confidence issues. He's been, I think you'd agree, Daniel, in describing him as a horse that was kind of rushed through any foundational work and just was fairly braced and fairly unconfident with what he was doing. How would you describe him?
I think that's fair to say. Yeah, he was kind of a ball of tension, essentially, but could get the job done. You could push him forward regardless. So fairly typical of what I would expect for the cowboy broke sort of horse.
Right.
But some, a horse that definitely has some tension to let go of, and we could make him a lot more comfortable, a lot more confident, and so forth. Which is, I think we made some progress in that area with him. So.
Yeah. And both Waddy and my other horse, a bay horse mafia, Lorenzo, who I sometimes call Table, because he's built like a table. He's a Mustang that is younger, coming on, how old is he? 6 or so. And again, lacking foundational confidence. I started him. I am sure that the fact that I skipped over a lot just out of ignorance led to him being unpredictable and unreliable in various settings. He's very super spooky horse, pretty much afraid of everything. He has a good head on his shoulders, but I lacked the skills to move forward with him also. So.
Okay. Well, and for what it's worth, I do think Lorenzo he's fairly Mustangish in that he has that very strong sense of self-preservation, so kind of the spookiness, but he was also pretty intelligent and gave us many calming signals pretty rapidly. So he is a horse you probably will be able to make progress with in pretty short order. He's not one that makes you wait around a whole lot for what's going to happen. He's kind of that open mirror sort of thing, rather than some of those horses that are more stoic and hide it, like Waddy. Waddy is a more stoic sort of horse that kind of does make you wait around a little bit before he starts to show you what's really behind the wall there. So yeah, pretty
Yeah,
cool.
it was and then I have my horse. Yeah, I have 4 horses. I often say 3.5 because one is a retired little pony. But my more finished horse is Ray, and the last day I got on him for an hour or so, and boy, what a joy. You kind of feel your whole body and your whole connection with a horse modify when you can step up on an animal that you have a more relaxed understanding of what we're doing, and he's a lot looser, and therefore I'm a lot looser. And you had mentioned, wouldn't it be great for me to step up on your finished horses? And it's a thing, because again, I share this for listeners because I feel like some of you might be in my situation where we really commit as a forever owner to horses that might be too much for us. And it's our responsibility to get better so that we can offer them, whether it's improved movement or more looseness or more fun, just straight up more fun. But it's really hard. If I had a like a Garmin watch on me, and we could have seen the difference in my heart rate or blood pressure, riding Lorenzo versus Waddy versus Ray, it's no joke. And of course the horses feel that, so it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy when your brain says, okay, let's do some good work with this young horse, but your emotions are like, I really don't want to come off, and I don't want to reach out of my comfort zone. And again, self-fulfilling prophecy of just being a little wad of tension. So I thought you were really great in translating what I needed to do for me so that I could do a lot of the handling. You didn't do too much of the handling in my mind. You did almost no riding of my horses. So I felt that was an important model for me. I mean, I don't think I would have gone to a clinic where the clinician is doing all the riding on my behalf, because it's important to have those bodily experiences. And yeah, you did do a little more groundwork, especially, I don't know if you have a shortcut for the very challenging groundwork you were doing with Lorenzo that was kind of working in circles while he was pulling a scary tarp. Do you have a shortcut for what that exercise is?
No, not really. And that's not something like. We do that in colt starting clinics, and I do that when I'm working, but it's not something I generally show the public, because obviously they could get themselves or a horse hurt taking things to that degree if they don't have the skills and so forth. So
Yeah. So that was an example where I was pretty confident that I would suck at that exercise, but I still wanted Lorenzo to have that experience, so that he could better downregulate in that situation. So in that case, it was a great idea for you to take the reins, as it were.
one thing, if I could interrupt you for a second, Maddie, that I wanted to share with people, and I think this is a pretty common thought process, but you shared with me, we didn't ride Ray until the last part of the last day. He was basically the last thing that we worked on, and you were saying that you felt like your greener horses really needed the time, and anytime you were not spending time with them, giving them the experience, you kind of felt guilty because that was where it needed to be. And what I said to you was, but you're part of the equation too, and you have to recalibrate yourself. So you need to take the time to get on the soft horse and feel the confidence. And just like we talk about horses being stuck in the sympathetic nervous system, if every ride you make in the course of a year is on a horse that you're a little bothered about, that's going to change the way you ride, so you need to get on the safe, comfortable, confident horse and get yourself down regulated and remember what that feels like. And then you can go back to the green horse with that in mind, kind of recalibrate yourself, know what you're aiming toward. Because if all you do is ride the green ones, you can get lost a little bit, or allow things to seem normal that shouldn't, because you're trying to aim at this ideal. So I did want to share that. I thought that was a good learning opportunity for everybody.
Yeah, agree 100%. And regarding your mention there of, moving forward and what's next, the biggest challenge, I think, for anyone coming off a really exciting clinic time or private lesson time or intense training, like last weekend, is two things. How do I reinforce and encourage the new patterns, one in the actual horsemanship and the riding that you're doing? We worked a lot on legs, and it can be confusing, and especially if you're trying to develop new patterns, it's tough to be confident that you're doing it right. So developing new patterns, with your horse, but also developing a new pattern in committing to improving your horse partner relationship, whether it's a green horse or a softer horse. Those two things have come up for me just in the day and a half that you guys have headed back to Louisiana, as real imperatives that if I'm going to make your trip worthwhile, I have to, on this back end, I have to really knuckle down and commit to essentially a new pattern of how I work with my horses and how much time I'm spending with them. And I think that one of those things might be forcing myself to touch base with you on a regular basis and let you, hold myself accountable in your eyes. So I may be bugging you for years to come, Daniel. I'm just saying.
Oh, it'll be my pleasure. One thing I want to mention, since you kind of bring it up that way, is that I really look at this stuff almost the same way I looked at a college class. And so like when I'm sitting in class, the professor's giving you all the information and you're taking notes, but no one expects you to have it right then. Like you have to go back and study and go over it again. And as you become familiar with different parts, maybe you look something up, it opens a new world for you. And so it isn't just about the live event there. You have to then do your homework and study afterwards. So one of the things I'm really big on with clinics and things like we did with you, at the end of each day or early the next morning before we start again, I'd do a bunch of voice notes in my phone to remind me of what we cover. And then I will kind of download all that and type out a bunch of notes for you to remind you of everything that we went through, which really winds up being pretty extensive for the most part. For the average clinic, that'll wind up being like 20 or 30 pages worth of notes. And to me, that is probably more valuable than the clinic itself, because there's only so much you're going to retain from what we did live. But then as you're reminded of it, you go back through it in your head, you get a little more familiar with it, you study on it. I really kind of view it like when we get done with something like this or a typical clinic, you've got like 6 months worth of homework to go do to master the things that we worked on in the clinic. I in no way expect you to master it on Saturday, but 6 months later, you should have changed significantly, so.
I was excited when you said that was your practice, and I'm really looking forward to those notes. one thing that I am aware of with just my observations of the horse community over the many years is that there's so many different ways that people learn. And unfortunately, I feel like the horse industry doesn't necessarily cater to the different ways that people learn. The clinic setting is nerve-wracking, and I'm not convinced it's the best way for people to learn. I think that, again, Randy Riemann told me if 20% of his clinic students are actually showing up and learning and really engaged, then he's pleased. So a lot of people show up to clinics, it being a social event, or, whether they want to show off a little. I just find the clinic setting to be difficult. And vis-a-vis our time together, I knew that I definitely needed to incorporate some downtime and some dwell time. And yeah, that makes it a little more time consuming in terms of how much you can squeeze in. But really, at the end of the day, 3 days, I just felt overwhelmed with information, and it was a good thing. And I'm not sure how better to do it. Like, if I lived in Louisiana and could hang out with Daniel Dauphin, 3 times a week, trying to be a protege, that would be cool. But I'm not moving to Louisiana anytime soon. I would prefer to campaign for you and April to move to Colorado.
Well, as beautiful as it was, and as much as we enjoyed it, you might have us leaning that way a lot more than we would have otherwise. So, well, let me ask you, and I don't mean to put you on the spot if this is an unfair question, but I don't know what expectations you had in mind exactly as to how this was going to go, but was there anything about the way we approached it that surprised you or was different than you were expecting it to be?
I think the big eye opener was that in order to fix the lack of confidence in both Wadi and Lorenzo, I really have to back up. And I think I was hoping that I could move forward from where I was and that I would be in the saddle a lot more last weekend. But I totally understand that in order to move forward, I really have to back up with more foundational stuff that wasn't offered to these horses years ago. And it doesn't mean I can't ride them, but it means that I need to work on the quieter, slower, more almost remedial stuff that has been ignored for years. Make sense?
Yeah. And I would say, for what it's worth, that's a very common scenario. It's not great, but it is typical that people will give me a list of things they would like to work on during a clinic or something, and then when you get the group in front of you, you realize that they're missing things that are needed in order to do this grand goal that they had. I've had clinics that were supposed to be specifically on working on lead changes, and half the people in the clinic didn't actually know their leads. And we can't work on the goal when we don't have the sub skills to get there. So that's very, very common. And I appreciate your grace in handling that, because I know there's probably always going to be some disappointment associated with realizing that you have to back up and redo some things or do some things for the first time that weren't done. But I don't know of any better or other way to go forward than making sure you're on a solid foundation to do so. So
It's humbling and it's not sexy. And I think that is why it ends up being disappointing for people, that they want to do something that makes them feel good and is sexier, and they can go home to their partners or their friends or their employers and say, hey, look what I can do. But it's a little bit like, I'm an accomplished writer, and I've spent years in the trenches, and when you write something that is polished, I think what a lot of people don't realize is that piece, whether it's 800 words or 20,000 words, it's been rewritten dozens of times. And specific words have been contemplated, even specific punctuation has been contemplated, as well as the grand scope of what you're actually trying to say and how you're trying to engage with people. Those questions and those struggles have been dealt with for hours and hours and hours. So I get it. It was just like, oh shit. It's not it's the old adage of going slow to go fast.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was, for one, pretty pleased. So I don't know if this is I think you're open to sharing this, but a couple of the problems that you had were horses that the two younger horses may be a little prone to sitting back at times, and so we did a lot of work on how you approach them and waiting at certain spots and making sure they were actually comfortable with your approach and everything you were doing. And I don't know how you felt about it. To me, I saw a tremendous amount of progress in both of them over the course of the weekend. So for instance, maybe it took 15 or 20 minutes the first day to saddle a horse, and you could do that in 3 or 4 by the last day without any of the problems or them thinking about sitting back or anything like that. So some of those things where it seems like we backed up, it's not like you have to stay backed up forever. You do get to make pretty rapid progress once the level of comfort is there. So what are your thoughts on that?
Again, for listeners, I'll illustrate this a little more blatantly. The first day that Daniel got here, I grabbed a lead line, and he just asked me to get one of the horses from the lot and bring him over and saddle him. And I did, and Daniel was very quiet. And I got him over to my horse trailer where I tie up and saddle my horses. And then he kind of said, okay, let's wait a second. And there were, in the time from when I went through the gate to my horse, came back through the gate and went to the trailer, there were like at least 6 moments where, in hindsight, and Daniel helped me understand this, I was being shown a sign from my horse that they were uncomfortable, and I was not honoring that. And it's like the scary thing on the trail, the first rabbit that you see, or the first deer that springs across the path. All those things build up to something like setting back. And it was, again, very humbling to see, okay, you didn't wait here, you didn't step back, you didn't ask him for this at X, Y, and Z points. And boy, to get that information pretty much within the first 30 minutes of our visit was impactful.
Okay. Well, you took it very well. That is one of those things I always have to kind of measure with people, because just like with a horse, there's only so much that this horse can take. So maybe I have a lot to say, but I can only give you this much right now. And you really, you handled it well. So I didn't have to worry about you having to break down and cry in there or anything like that. Like you you took it in stride and made the adjustments. And I think, again, it was probably a blessing that we started working with Lorenzo, because he was pretty easy to read and gave you the calming signal stuff almost immediately. As soon as you did it right, he told you did it right. And that's the perfect kind of horse to work with. Whereas like Waddy was more reserved about that. And even if though you did it right, he might make you wait 2 minutes before he licked. Or I think we only got one lick and chew on the first day, something like that. And then the next day he opened up a lot more and started showing us some other things. But if your horse isn't giving you a lot of feedback, sometimes you don't have an idea if you're on the right path or not. So you've got a real blessing with Lorenzo being such a responsive mirror for you there.
Right.
So
Yep. Agreed.
So where to go now? Do you have any things that you were really surprised about that you thought you were nailing, only to come to find out that there was a problem there?
I don't think outside of the overall perspective of needing to shore up foundational elements and really foundational connection. Yeah, I guess in hindsight, it's not surprising at all. I think that we all like to imagine we have good connections with our horses. And of course, it's humbling to realize that we could do much better. So
When I said that, I kind of had something specific in mind, and I don't mean to embarrass you with this, but to me, I think you were kind of surprised at how one-sided they were. I didn't think that you realized you weren't doing as much stuff on the right. And I thought, again, that was one of those things. Once you became aware of it and you started purposefully working on it, I thought both horses showed a pretty tremendous change from day 1 to day 4, on the one-sidedness part of everything. So
yeah, no, I just spaced on that. You're absolutely right.
and again, super common, super common. That's one of those things I always expect to find. One of the things I'm going to give you kudos on, I've always found this correlation. It's part of why I asked the dogs or cats question, which I didn't give you because you're obviously dogs. But people that have dogs and have actually trained those dogs, so they don't just have like a purse pet, kind of a fluffy 5-pound thing, but like you've got working dogs. To me, people that have that basis of experience always have a much easier time with horses, because some of the maybe unpleasant realities that those who overly anthropomorphize horses don't want to face, you've already conquered with regard to dogs. So like the fact that you need to be firm sometimes, and you need to not put up with some shit and say, no, stop that. If you are under the illusion that that will never occur with horses if you do everything correctly, you are you're not living in the real world, I would say. And so that wasn't a problem that we had with you. So you were fine with, if and when we needed to be a little more firm, and we did with Lorenzo in particular. There were a couple points where needed to pretty firmly say, no, don't do that again. And
Yeah, I know. I think I have given too much attention to the word feel, but there's so much in timing around feel. And I have thought a lot about timing with training dogs. I feel, dogs get trained a lot differently than horses do as predator animals, that they just think differently and they operate differently. And as a dog owner, dog trainer, horse owner, horse trainer, I think there's a lot of commonality. Timing is one thing that I've thought a lot about. For example, it's pretty hard if you're house training a dog. It's hard to come upon an accident in the house 2 hours after it happened and think that you're going to be effective by punishing that dog. If you can't correct a dog in the moment, if you can't praise a dog in the moment, then there is, again, just my opinion, but there's zero use in disciplining a dog a minute later, an hour later, because they're like horses, they're in the moment. So I have a greater appreciation for timing and the importance of offering a release vis-a-vis dogs, offering praise or offering a correction exactly when I need to. And after this weekend, again, I need to up my game in that vein. And we worked a lot on getting a horse's attention and rewarding that attention. And I think that the better your timing is, the more your horses are going to say, well, she's worth paying attention to. And that was a new, I guess it's not a new observation, but it's certainly a newly reaffirmed observation of how important, you really have to be present, and you really have to be thinking about how quick you can release when you get what you're asking for. And like you had said, Daniel, a few days ago, you can see that weight shift before you see the foot moving forward, for instance. So honor the weight shift. And it's kind of like, I have disparaged cold starting competitions, but it's kind of cool when you go to an event like that, and you're sitting with someone, say a Daniel Dauphin, and if you could get a play-by-play of what somebody really good is seeing versus, say, what I see, or say, my brother who doesn't know horses at all, the broad spectrum of what people are seeing and what people are getting excited about. That was a big revelation working with you, is that, can I advance myself for the sake of the horse so that I can release before he does something as blatant as yielding his shoulder or whatever? Can I honor the thought that he's going to yield? And that's pretty fascinating when you get to thinking about it.
Well, I appreciate that. One thing I kind of do want to bring up too, there was a pretty consistent theme as we were working with these horses, and I do want to comment here. You're cowboying off of these horses, or cowgirling off of these horses, and so they're going to be used to do things that can potentially be dangerous, and you are in country that is potentially dangerous as well. And so this is one of those areas I like to talk about because I think it is misunderstood and not ever spoken about in the way that it needs to be. And I see a lot of harm or potential harm done, and that is kind of the area of desensitizing, or what we call desensitizing. And one of the things that I see a lot is that people will work on a horse what they think is tolerating something to a point where it stands still. And it's more common than we realize that what they actually have rewarded and reinforced is the horse in the freeze response. And so they have a lot less tolerance there than they think they might have. We're fully into the sympathetic nervous system. And so one of the things I was trying to get you to do consistently, because this could be something your life depends on at one point, whether they're not actually comfortable with it or not, is to couple the desensitizing exercises with giving the horse a cue it actively has to engage in to participate. And so if we can get the cue, and they will now do this and turn left, and go forward and go back, or whatever the thing is, we know we're not in the freeze response. And so we know we have a horse that actually is tolerating this. And secondarily, if things are bad, he's used to the scary thing happening and you controlling him at the same time with obedience. And so when you pair that together, to me, it makes them so much safer and more reliable down the road. And I just don't hear people talking about that. I think that's a really important thing to be aware of and to be conscious of when you're working on your horse.
I agree 100%. I think people don't talk about it because it's kind of a complicated idea. One thing we saw, and I'm going to try to explain this for the listeners, of a horse that is nervous about something. We're working in a round pen, for instance, and there's a tarp involved. And for the first few days, Lorenzo had a really tight muzzle. He was 100% sympathetic nervous system. He was being moved around. He was being, intentionally scared. I know there's a better word, but for lack of it, we'll use that. And just getting used to having something dragged behind him, for instance. And by the third day, he was working through that exercise while also licking and chewing. And the trot or the lope that he had was not panicked. It was reserved. And I was proud of him because he, and obviously, Daniel, you gave him the opportunity to feel controlled in what would otherwise be a scary situation. And, say, for instance, a branding situation where there's ropes being thrown and the potential for a horse to get caught up and there being big animals everywhere. It's super, super important in order for a horse to be level-headed and safe. And that's definitely something that we'll be working on, definitely something that we have not had in the past. And I've had some scary incidents with that horse in particular where, what's the expression? If not for the grace of God. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was a good, and I think you're right. Like I said, it doesn't get talked about enough because, yeah, I mean, why do you think it doesn't get talked about enough? I think it's just complicated. There's no sweet phrase that can surmise what that objective is in those situations.
Well, my feeling on it is a little different. I don't think most people are really aware of it in that way, and I think I guess the kind of thing I've only had the perspective to recognize and give words to in the last 5 years. Most people's colt starting careers don't last 30 years. They get to be about 32, they get married, they have a few kids, and now they hire some 18-year-old to do all of that stuff for them. And so you don't have that many guys with gray in their beard or ladies with gray in their hair that are still working on the could kill you stuff and the desensitizing aspect of it. And all those years and all those horses gives you a perspective you don't have otherwise. And so I just don't think it's really appreciated by many people, and most of the people that are still doing that stuff, like I say, they're kind of on the younger side, and they're maybe too close to the tree to see the forest at that stage in their deal. But I think it's a really important thing to talk about. Like, as we see on social media, I wish it would stop, but you have these people that want to post videos of the colt on the first ride bucking like hell in the round pen and looks real cowboy and all that. But I can see a lot of those horses when they go to step on them. That horse is clearly in the freeze response, and obviously the first step is going to be a big one. And I think the freeze response is really tough to recognize, and for that reason doesn't get talked about as much. It's a lot easier to miss and so forth. And so that's why I try to bring attention to it and avoiding it, because if you train a horse to do that on the regular, you're probably going to have some ER bills that are going to be a lot more expensive than the training was. So,
Yeah, agreed.
well, I really appreciate the opportunity to come out there and work with you in the beautiful setting. We had decent weather, I guess. There was one day we got snowed on pretty good. That was a little bit nasty, but I enjoyed the break into the cooler weather. I know you're kind of over it at this point in the year, but unless there's something else you wanted to specifically talk about, I did want to chat with you a little bit about a couple of your other projects that you've got going on right now.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
okay, well, let's get into Buck the Trend first. So, I was very privileged to be asked to be a part of the inaugural Buck the Trend, which was a little bit over a year ago. And it was probably, I think, not at all hyperbolic to say that it was a life-changing sort of experience. So why don't you tell us what the catalyst for all of that was, and what Buck the Trend is aiming at working on?
Buck the Trend is a project that I started thinking about years ago. When I think back to Peter Campbell's death in 2017 or 18, he died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. He was a very popular clinician, and there was several other kind of mental health associated things that happened that I either had direct knowledge of or direct experience of, or heard about, that made it clear that this community, which has a fair amount of testosterone in it, has a fair amount of pull yourself up by the bootstraps, stoicism, culturally, it's very similar to the community I grew up in on the coast of Maine, which is lobstermen and fishermen, and the Maine reserve of not talking about anything. It was my idea to try to delve into that in a way that might be helpful and nurture a cultural shift around wellness and mental health in the horse community. Buck the Trend, the first one, last February, thanks to a grant from the Lore Foundation, as well as just a ton of sweat equity on my part, was about 20 of us who got together in what I'd call a pretty intimate setting with a facilitator, i.e. me, and two therapists, bringing together, and everyone that came was in the horse community, several ranchers, a few horsemen who are also cops, which was interesting. They're, certainly law enforcement has kind of parallel stressors. And I just felt from my experience with working at the Best Horse Practices Summit that the most appropriate and effective way to help people with mental health challenges was providing tools, skills for navigating challenging interpersonal relationships and learning to treat ourselves a little better and a little more in a more informed way. So it was not sitting around the campfire singing Kumbaya. It was a very intense, very kind of knowledge-oriented 2.5 days. It also just happened, venue and the feel of a setting and the kind of people that would be interacting has always been top of mind for me. So, for instance, we did not have this in a hotel conference room. We had it in a renovated barn in big country. You know, if people needed to go for a walk, they could walk up a hill for a quarter of a mile and not see anybody else. I also paid attention to the therapists and made sure they had a good understanding of what kind of people were coming to this event. And I frankly am not sure it would have worked with other therapists, just because these two, a man and a woman, Katie Bryant and Joseph Precup, they knew farm, ranch, horse type people. And that was important. We talked extensively before the event on what to expect in terms of, just how vulnerable people were willing to be in that kind of setting. Buck the Trend had segments on everything from kind of suicidality and role playing in a suicidal type of crisis, to what group therapy looks like, to the myths around therapy work. I'm just ticking off a few, but it was exciting that it was so successful. It was also, I'd say, for all the attendees, pretty exhausting and intense. There's a lot of vulnerability there. We had a great group that just kind of naturally, there was a certain level of trust and sharing that could go on. Now, just to update you, Daniel, Buck the Trend has gotten a lot of buzz in state circles around the Office of Suicide Prevention, and some working groups around like what does work in a rural setting in terms of helping communities that are traditionally very hard to reach and very stoic and standoffish. So I'm really excited about where it might go. The challenge, as ever, is raising money.
Well, we'll definitely have a link in the show notes if anybody has it on their heart to help donate to this, or maybe has an in with an organization that would like to help sponsor this, or help out with it in some way. We're looking for the help, and we would gladly accept that. And this is definitely the kind of thing so the one we had before was a pilot program, but you are looking to expand this and offer it in more places and more times. And it kind of is a training. So it wasn't necessarily for our specific benefit, but to give us the tools to go help others and to recognize certain things and to know enough to kind of know what resources we could offer to somebody, or help them if they need. So it was really pretty enlightening. So like one of the things I'll share is I had done some therapy prior to this, about 6 months, and I really didn't find it very helpful at all. And one of the things I learned at Buck the Trend from the two therapists was that you should interview therapists. So maybe you should talk with 6 or 8, and you're going to find someone that kind of speaks your language. And the therapist that I had was a very, very passive person, and I am not a passive person. I want actionable steps. I need something active to go do. And so like Katie, the female therapist there, is more my type. She's gonna grab the bull by the horns, and we're gonna work on this damn thing, and we're not gonna beat around the bush, and we're gonna confront it head on. And so that wasn't really a thought that would have occurred to me prior, was that not every therapist can help you. You kind of do need to match and find that person that speaks your language, or that you can appreciate the way they're coming at things. So
a couple things I wanted to mention. One, listeners should know that Daniel is newly on the board of the Best Horse Practices Summit. We're thrilled to have him. And Buck the Trend exists under the auspices of the Best Horse Practices Summit, which is a 501c3 here in Colorado. The other observation I made with people who came to our first Buck the Trend is that We were careful not to get people, invite people who were like immediately in crisis or immediately struggling, for instance, with sobriety. The people that came to buck the trend, and I think this should be a standard moving forward, were already amenable to the idea that their mental health and the mental health of those around them was a worthwhile pursuit. And so they kind of bought in advance to the idea of wanting to know more, and being in a group that had that collective motivation.
Well, I have to say you picked an excellent group, particularly like you said, the nature of what we do. We tend to be pretty stoic, kind of like your lobsterman. There's a certain amount of cold and pain that's associated with this, and you're supposed to act like that doesn't exist and it's not going on. We're all feeling it, so it's not useful information to talk about. We also had a pretty strong, I think everybody there was an introvert to varying degrees, some extremely introvert. And so when you're talking, we're all crammed in this room together, uh, and then talking about pretty intimate stuff. I thought it was a very brave group that we had. It's pretty incredible in the short period of time that we were together, that some of the things that people opened up about and talked about. And like you said, y'all had some planned breaks in there, and it was said right at the beginning, if anybody needs to get up and walk outside and take a little walk and not be in this environment for a few minutes, then that was perfectly acceptable. You don't ask permission, you don't owe anybody an explanation, you just do what you need to do for you. And I think that that was taken care of a few times throughout. So it was respectful and reasonable. And I think within that that was required for everybody to be able to get something out of it and process it. And then we also had the workbooks that y'all put together, so we had something to take home and reference and go back and chew over it a few more times and kind of study on it and all of that. So I thought it was just especially for our first attempt, it was a tremendous offering, and lot of stuff that we got out of that just was great. So
I had a meeting yesterday with some people affiliated at a state level with trying to do good things in the rural mental health space. And one thing that I've learned through the conference Best Horse Practices Summit, as well as through working with horses, as well as running Buck the Trend, is that you have to pay attention to the details. And everything from the selection of therapists to the selection of the setting to what we ate. We're not going to eat, if you're offering something to a bunch of horsemen and half of them are cowboys and ranchers, we're not going to offer tofu. And that's probably obvious. But organizing these things has helped me appreciate that paying attention to details, whether it is getting a horse from the dry lot and paying attention to how you halter him, and whether or not he faces up and how he moves through the gate, is a lot like organizing a conference. It's important to pay attention to details because how volunteers treat an attendee at the Best Horse Practices Summit matters. And so, yeah, it's I kind of jazz on the details, Daniel.
well, why don't we talk a little bit about the Best Horse Practices Summit? So we'll be having a mini summit this fall, which it'll be a little bit of a departure from past ones. So I would say I was privileged to participate in the last one in 2022, and it was a totally unique experience. I have never been to anything like it, and I would say intimate fits. I mean, it was I came away with more contacts and networking and all of that stuff from that event, not just among the presenters, but like I know names and faces of the people that were there to watch us and met them and feel like I kind of know them when I left. It wasn't just, this nameless Joe Smith out of 8,000 people that came walking by your table or anything like, we had meals together. We did everything together. And so you really kind of know some of these people when you leave. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the summit that's planned for this fall?
We're bringing it back to the Southwest. The very first Best Horse Practices Summit in 2017 was here in Durango, Colorado. Santa Fe is a bit bigger. It is the home of one of our presenters, Katrin Silva, who's been a presenter for several years. She does outstanding work, and it's at her home barn. Joining us will be Patrick King, Jim Masterson, yourself, Ben Longwell, and Katrin Silva. I'm excited about the lineup. It'll be a little different in that there will be very few, if any, PowerPoint type academic presentations. It's more geared to arena observation. We'll have a trade show, as we always have, and we are also limiting it to just 70 people. We'll also not be video recording it. That was very expensive endeavor and kind of something that cramped our bottom line as an organization in a big way. So we won't be recording it. Best Horse Practices Summit presentations have all been available on Vimeo to stream. They're super affordable, but we won't be doing that kind of recording this year. So it's either show up and take advantage of all the expertise or miss out.
Well, one thing that I'll say too, I'm the type of clinician that welcomes a lot of questions from the audience. And when you're doing the videoing and all, because we're mic'd up, it makes it a lot harder to take questions from the audience. And so that's a little prohibitive toward my style. Plus it not videoing it, now that we're allowing more questions, they can get from it ask the question that they have that I may not be demonstrating or in the way that they need or whatever, and now we can kind of tailor this toward the audience that we have. So I recognize the departure there of not having the videos to sell later and as a resource, but at the same time for the people that are there live, it'll be even more intimate from what was previously an incredibly intimate event. So.
Yeah, that's something that I'm glad you mentioned, because it does, as Daniel said, we definitely tamp down the questions mid-presentation or post-presentation, and those will be welcomed this time around.
So another thing that's going to be very unique about this one, I at the last one, the presentations were not collaborative, but and it's the only one I can speak to, so I'm not saying previous ones were different, but it was the most collaborative event I've ever been to. A lot of times you go there and kind of the behind the scene things, you may have two clinicians that are at each other's throats that nobody knows about, and they may go out there and backstab each other in their presentations. And this thing was just, it was almost like a jazz music session where everybody was taking something from the previous persons and adding to it, and there was no animus or ill will, it was just openness and collaboration at its peak. And I think you've taken that idea and added to it purposefully more in this one. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Every presentation will be a collaboration. And Daniel's right. In the past, there's been a lot of collaboration, formal and informal, intended and unintended, at all the Best Horse Practices summits. We've often mic'd up just observing presenters as they are watching presentation going on and having them weigh in, which is fun. But in Santa Fe in November, each presentation, and there'll probably be about 8 presentations, will be collaborations with 2 or more presenters, and I'm super psyched about that. I think that a lot of us in the horse industry would like to push back on the guru following that goes on. I don't think it's healthy for anyone. I don't even think it's healthy for the gurus, but especially not the followers. So it's a response to that.
Well, I would say it's going to offer a pretty unique deal there too, because we're kind of from different segments of the horse world. So like, and I'm going to throw Patrick in here because he's a buddy of mine, but he's a classical dressage guy. I'm obviously not. And when you see us or Katrin and I, we were going to work on one on contact. And so you will get 2 very different perspectives on what that might mean and then explanations as to why. So it's not just, one person's opinion here. You kind of have 2 people that can go back and forth on something. And I'm not aware of any other place where you can get something like that, much less 8 different presentations that are all kind of tailored that way. We've also been having some pre-show Zoom meetings between us so that we can plan these things so that it is well organized and the different combinations of presenters can put their heads together and decide what they might want to do. So for instance, I mentioned Katrin will be doing one with her on contact. I'll be doing another one with Ben Longwell on transitioning a horse from riding in 2 hands into 1 hand. And he's going to come at that from the vaquero style, and I'll be coming at it from my own perspective. So I think not only is that unique, but it's also very helpful, because sometimes when you see that kind of stuff presented, it may be presented more as in the way rather than a way, and there are many roads that lead to Rome. So kind of having that perspective, I think, is very helpful and opening to the people who may not be aware of all the options that there are out there. So when you see some different options, you can more tailor your little Frankenstein programs however you see fit.
Yeah, we've done surveys so that I know that most summit attendees are both English and Western, not each individual one, but about half the people who come to the summit are English and the other half are Western. And keep your eyes, ears, and mind open, because there are helpful, there's a reason those disciplines flourish, and there are helpful tips and philosophies and comportments of any discipline really, but certainly English v Western for sure. So yeah, that'll be I was just thinking about the Zoom call we had in which you and Katrin talked about insights with contact, and that's going to be awesome. As well as what you mentioned, the one with Ben Longwell and transitioning from 2 hands to 1 hand. So and many more, and having Jim Masterson in the mix will be fun. He's just a very fun, generous, collaborative kind of guy. Super psyched to have him join us.
Mm-hmm. No ego either. He is as big of a fish he is in our business. He could afford to be a great big asshole, and he is not in any way, shape, or form. He's as nice and generous a guy as you ever want to meet. So
yes, agree wholeheartedly.
Well, why don't we talk a little bit about On Ice to wrap things up?
Thank you.
This is something you drug me into here, and I have to say what my part in it morphed into wasn't really what I was expecting it to be in the beginning. But why don't you tell us what On Ice is?
What did you expect it to be in the beginning?
Oh, I wasn't expecting it to be my part of it to be as emotional as it wound up being. That was kind of just what happened in the moment, and I'm simultaneously proud and embarrassed of how it came out. But anyway,
Just FYI for listeners, get the Kleenex if you're going to listen to Daniel's segment on Aw Nice. It's on Aw Nice. That's AWENICE.com. So that project started after the election, and as a opinion writer for the Washington Post, I was being prodded by my editor to write something from the perspective of essentially the rural West. And I was so discouraged by the amount of polarization and vitriol that I didn't feel I had anything to offer to put into the media sphere that one, would be authentic, and two, would be that I could be proud of. And I thought for the better part of a month on what would be something that would make me feel good putting it out there for readers or listeners. And I landed on Aw Nice, which is interviews with people who work outside. So far, most of them are horsey folks, but this in a few days, I'm going to interview a lineman, somebody who works on electricity, outside. And I intend to interview everyone from Maine fishermen to Alaskans to people who work with timber, as well as, more ranchers, outfitters, horsemen. But it is talking about a moment of wonder that they experienced. I think everyone has moments of wonder. I think that what I hope people will take away from Aw Nice and from listening is that they too have moments of wonder, and that the more you keep your eyes and ears open and stay quote unquote present, the more likely you are to see moments of wonder. I mean, I think we all have the potential to experience moments of wonder every day, if we make ourselves available to it. So yeah, I hope you guys check it out. It's unlike the marathon interviews that Daniel is capable of. I have such a short bandwidth that one of the parameters I set was that these be very short, 10 minutes or less. There's an ulterior motive there because Aw Nice segments are available during Morning Edition, which is the NPR show that runs 2 or 3 hours in the morning on public radio stations. And Aw Nice is being featured every Friday on the Cortez station, KSJD.
well, it is very cool, and I think you've just released the first one, came out last week or something like that. But I got to get a little bump in line and listen to several of the other ones that have already been recorded and are to be released, and it's definitely a nice departure from the day. Especially, I'm kind of envisioning most of this sort of stuff people would do as they're driving around in the car, and there's plenty that you might hear on the radio that increase your blood pressure, so you need some things that take you the other way and make you glad to be alive and look out the window with a little different perspective. I think that's exactly what you've done with this. So
Thank you.
kudos to you.
Thank you. That was my goal. And I want to give props to Forrest Van Tile, who was generous enough to let me use music that he created. I'm friends with Forrest, has done a lot of cowboying up in Eastern Oregon and Eastern Washington. And he's a musician that's just about to start a tour with his wife, Margot Silker.
Well, from logo to music to the content within, I think you've done a pretty cool job with this, and it's got the trademark Maddy stamp of doing good for the world, with hardly your name attached at all, always in the background, pulling the strings. So,
That's how we like it.
yeah. So with all the things that we've already talked about that you're doing, it may surprise people that you somehow found the time to collaborate with your son and do a film in the last couple of years. That's a short film which you have just gone through some of the I'm spacing on what I want to call film festivals with, and it is called A Brutal, Beautiful Life. So tell us about that, what that was like.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to chat about it real quick. A Brutal, Beautiful Life came out of the conversation that I had with my son, Bo Cochran, who is an accomplished whitewater kayaker and adrenaline junkie, very accomplished mountain biker, snowboarder. And my beef with all that is that outdoor recreation, for starters, they lack an understanding of what we're doing as ranchers up on public land, whether that's biking through cows or leaving gates open. It's kind of a constant frustration with us folks. And secondly, outdoor recreation gets a lot of buzz in the media world, and the quieter people who are out on the land or in the water aren't heard. And A Brutal, Beautiful Life is a 10-minute documentary. As it happened, everyone that we worked with were women. So it talks about ranching, especially from a woman's perspective, and it breaks down the species involved, which is to say cow, horse, dog, human, and kind of treats those entities distinctly. It's a really wonderful narration by Vicky Tossig, who is the mom of Caitlin Tossig, who coincidentally premiered Aw Nice, the audio project. I interviewed Vicky Tossig extensively, and Bo very cleverly edited down that interview, which was over an hour and a half, to 10 minutes of a rich monologue that is a voiceover for the entire film. It was shot in Creede, Colorado, and Kremlin, Colorado, and Northern Colorado, and here in Dolores. And it has been selected for the Sedona International Film Festival and the Amdocs, which is in Palm Springs, California, and has just been shortlisted on the 1.4 awards, which is in London. So we're super excited about it. The film is incredibly rich and musical and beautiful, and we'll have a link to it I hope that, Daniel, you can put a link in the show notes.
Absolutely. Yep. And I was privileged to watch it with you. Both my wife and I sat there, and I think we all kind of had a little tear in our eye at one moment. It is only 10 minutes, but it is a pretty powerful film. And I can say I've done enough video and audio stuff that I am firmly at conscious incompetence. I know enough to know how much I don't know. And so I can see some of the trails that, like, I was in my head as I was watching it, I was seeing the Premiere Pro editing screen of all the different layers of the audio and the stuff. And I was like, wow, it's 10 minutes, but it's complex. Like, there's a lot going on in this thing. And the audio was great to have the voiceover, and you're hearing the wind through the pines and the dogs running and the horses' hooves and the cattle bawling and the streams in the background and all. I know how hard audio is, and that was no simple trick to get all of that and have it play together the way that it did. So it really, on all levels, is a phenomenal 10-minute documentary. One thing I wanted to ask you about, because you mentioned this when we watched it, your choice, because you are a writer, so this was not accidental, your choice of the word brutal, a brutal, beautiful life. So as you've taken this around to some of these film festivals, how have you gotten any pushback on that? And go.
I am so thankful for you asking that question. The brutality that Vicky Tossig talks about when you listen to it is the discomfort, I think, that ranchers experience every day, the tough choices that have to be made. There are some lives you cannot save. As she says in the movie, we wouldn't be in this if we didn't love animals. And I experienced some pushback from kind of PETA, People for Ethical Treatment of Animals, and folks like that, who, in my mind, misinterpret the word brutal as us abusing or misusing animals. And I'm grateful to work in communities that practice low stress stockmanship and are very, very thoughtful about how they live and breathe and work with animals. I think that it is inevitable that anyone in our field experiences brutality. And that's not to be confused with mistreating animals or being brutal to animals. It's that life hands you death on a regular basis. And a lot of that is unavoidable. I mean, my veteran dog, Monty, got really hurt last fall when we were beginning an 8-day-long gather, and shit happens when you're in rough country, when you're working with 1,000-pound or 1,500-pound animals. Monty's a 40-pound dog, and he got injured and lived another day, but it was not for the faint of heart. And I think that all ranchers every day have to make decisions that may be closely or distantly related to life and death, but that's an understanding that they come to they need to embrace as just part of how what it is to work with animals. And I think that someone who is removed from that, who doesn't have those daily experiences, the decisions that you, Daniel, and I, and thousands of other people that work with animals have to make, there's a certain joy of working with animals, and there's a certain brutality in the tough decisions we have to make, the tough actions that we have to run out. And it's something that I found at film festivals that people simply aren't going to understand until you take them out for a day or a month into rough country with lots of dull days, sure, but moments of excitement that can be either heartbreaking or heartwarming. Brutality is complicated.
It is. I think that it's part of the anthropomorphism that we have that is a major problem, is that divorce of reality. We think of the Mustangs and we revere them in all these different ways. They apparently have the best hoof care known to man, and all of these other things that we compare them to. They also have an average lifespan of 8 years. And when they die, it's not euthanized by a veterinarian with love and a great big last meal. It is at the hands of a mountain lion or drought or a pretty damn brutal ending. And we tend to sort of revere what we view as the positive parts of that, and we turn a blind eye to the reality and the negative parts of that kind of stuff. And it is often the people who themselves aren't in harm's way or in discomfort that are the hardest critics and judges of those of us who are actually out there freezing our asses off, getting wet for hours and hours and hours, or up early in the morning before it's daylight out there taking care of these animals. And then they want to misconstrue your use of the word brutal. It's brutal on us too, right? It's not just brutal on the animals. It's the environment, the situation, the life, the death. It's not that we're out there brutalizing the animals. We're acceptors of it, and you have to accept that in order to be a part of the stewardship and all of the other aspects of it as well. And so I love how you put that right up front in the title, and it's a word that needs to be unabashed and out there for conversation and for people to realize, I believe anyway, the
Yeah.
idealization is not helpful to anyone. We have to be real.
Yeah. Thank you. It was very intentional, and it was important. I think at some point, Bo wanted to call it a beautiful life. And my response was, it's, like what I'm seeing every day with even the work that I do, which I don't own my own cattle. I day work, and I help other people, but I wish that, for instance, that he could have captured a lot more winter work, because all his filming occurred between April and August. And, I talked to Caitlin a few months ago, and she's like, well, it's 30 below here, and I'm just hoping the tractor starts. And so much of that work, I was just pulling posts on a fence line last week, and I think my boots weighed 7 pounds just with the mud that we were tromping through. And those are just very simple snapshots of a day in the life. And it is definitely hard for someone, say in Sedona, to appreciate the nuance of work with horses and work with dogs and cows.
Yeah. I'll share that just before the trip that we made there to you, we had a mare that was due to foal. It was overdue, actually, and I was hoping that she was going to foal before we left, so that the guy that's going to watch the place didn't have to deal with that. And turns out she foaled the morning we were supposed to leave. Our flight got canceled due to weather, and we get back here right around daylight, and wound up, I worked like hell for a couple hours, and we wound up losing the foal. And then you got to get up and go to work anyway. That didn't stop the world, and the fact that you worked hard at it and spent some money on it and all of that stuff, it's brutal. We take the licks too. So it's not pretty, and not the part that you like to talk about. But I shared a YouTube video several years ago. We made a video. We had a dummy foal born, and that was the only one I have ever had. And we went through that whole process, and he was born premature, and I think he lived about 36 hours. And I was pretty hesitant about sharing that, but I felt like, people need to see the bad parts of it too. It's not all April through August with the sun shining, right? Sometimes it's hell, and it's unfortunate, and it's costly financially and emotionally. And that's part of why things like Buck the Trend need to happen, because you can do everything right in this business, and the wrong winter or summer can come along and just take the legs right from underneath you. And that can be an awful lot to deal with at times. I've seen people that have almost PTSD like symptoms from some of these things. They had a really bad experience in a drought, and another one starts, and they get no peace until that thing is over. My mom, my parents' house flooded, about 4 feet of water in it in 2016. We had a rain event that was just, I think we got something like 36 inches of rain in 24 hours or something like that. They wound up with 4 feet of water in their house. And then 3 years later, it flooded again. They only got 2 or 3 inches, but that still doesn't, ruins the floors and all that stuff. And my mom more or less dealt with PTSD after that. Anytime it rained more than about an inch or two, she was at the front door looking out the window, seeing if the water was coming up the sidewalk. And so I think we see a lot of that in the ranching communities, the veterinarians, all of the people that have to deal with these things, the brutal, beautiful life. So.
Yeah. Thank you. It's not easy.
All right. Almost on cue. Was that Daisy?
It's Chuck and Tina and
Well, Maddy, is there anything that you want to cover that we haven't covered? I know you're almost an hour and a half in here now, so I know that's an eternity for you.
It's a marathon for me, man. I know it's just a coffee break for you, but just a huge thank you, Daniel, for your attentive, thoughtful work on a one-on-one basis. That was a real big treat for me. And thanks for all the good work you're doing.
Well, I hope it was. I know you were a little leery about it at first and how that was going to go. I don't know if it wound up being what you wanted it to be, but I hope that it was definitely worthwhile to you and gives you plenty to chew on and continue to work on throughout. So,
yep, you bet. I'm looking forward to your notes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Well, as always, thank you for your time this morning and all the wonderful things that you're doing. And we'll have links to all of the different things that we have talked about here this morning. So if anybody is looking for the movie, the documentary, or Buck the Trend, or Nicker News, we'll be able to have links for you to find it in the show notes. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week for another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I've been your host, Daniel Dolphin.